Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the PFN Scouting Podcast. We are episode 5 or 6 at this point. I can't remember exactly how many it has been, but we are excited to be back. Week 0 of college football is over with. We're going into week 1. We're going to talk about Sam Hartman because I think out of everything that happened in week 0, that is the biggest storyline coming from week 0. But as always, I got to start off with Ian. How are you doing?
Doing good. Week 0 was kind of a tame introduction to the college football season. We know, as scouts, week 1 is going to come around and it's going to be just an avalanche of film from that point on each week. So it's going to be a lot to keep up with for sure, but we're in it now. We're getting started and, I like kind of being eased into it, right? Week 1, if week 1 just hits just like that, you got dozens of games to follow right away. So this kind of gives us a little primer. And it was a fun one. I mean, you got to start with Sam Hartman, 19 of 23, 251 yards, 4 touchdowns in his Notre Dame debut. Productive as always. He started this year in reach of the all-time college football passing touchdowns record for a career. So we'll have to see if he breaks it, man. He's off to a good start, but I feel like it's a natural segue for us because before we get into the week 1 preview, we're going to preview some team matchups today and then get into prospect matchups on Thursday. But we want to talk a little bit more about the quarterback class because there is so much to talk about. So we reviewed quarterbacks 6 through 10 last week and the week before, quarterbacks 1 through 5. So if you want to watch or listen to those podcast episodes, go back and do that. But today we're getting to the guys just outside the top 10 because it is a deep, talented quarterback class. And there's a lot of ground to cover, but it makes sense to start with Sam Hartman after the performance he had.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that I noticed from it was just the dude's toughness. He's obviously like got the look. He's got a little bit of the Will Grier, Trill Grier look to him. He's got the fantastic beard. He looks like a quarterback that would be on the tougher side. But even when he was pressured, I mean, he got absolutely obliterated a couple of times and still was able to deliver passes. 19 of 23. If things stood as they were today throughout the entire season, he would absolutely obliterate the efficiency record. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But yes, he was incredibly efficient, effective. And that wasn't in perfect conditions because although it was Navy, that Navy team is a little bit down. Their wide receivers were just bigger, more physical than the Navy cornerbacks were. He still had to make the throws, and he had to make those throws under a lot of duress a lot of the time. So it was cool to see him be so comfortable with people not just bearing down at him, but bearing down at his knees, at his ankles at times. So I thought that was a really nice little treat for the first game of college football.
Yeah, it's really fun to watch quarterbacks who can operate with that kind of poise because when you think about poise, it's not just standing tall, right? It's really easy to feel claustrophobic in the pocket, right? Especially when you've got your eyes downfield, you're trying to make your reads and survey the field when, at the same time, you've got interior pressure threats coming, you've got looping pressure guys who, you got to try and feel and sense those guys, optimally. And Sam Hartman is one of those quarterbacks who I wrote up his scouting report ahead of the game. It'll be up soon on PFN, but he's a guy who he's overaged. He's going to be a 25-year-old rookie. He doesn't have great tools, and I think that's evident too. He's a good athlete. He's good enough as an athlete to get out and escape when he needs to. Doesn't have a great arm, right? You don't see a ton of velocity generation. That's very clear. But another thing that is very distinct in his game, very few quarterbacks have the poise that he does to just remain completely composed in your in phase, in your stance, not exiting that stance. We talked a little bit about JJ McCarthy last week where he's a great creator, but when he encounters pressure, right, it's really easy for his process to kind of erode right now, right? So staying poised and staying composed and staying on schedule with your reads and with your mechanics while there's pressure coming, it's really hard to do that, right? And Sam Hartman makes it look effortless, right? And then the situational accuracy on some of his throws too, putting it where only his receivers can get it, leading them away from tight coverage, right? Just things like that. You look at that and you say, I probably wouldn't draft him in the early rounds because of those diluting factors. But if he's tough, if he's poised, if he's composed, and if he can make use of his accuracy in those tight situations and throw open his receivers, that at the very least, those are traits that I'm looking for in a quality safety blanket on day 3, right? So, round 5 to round 7, if he's still there, if I have an extra pick, I'm definitely locking him down to get that kind of security blanket for my QB room.
Yeah, and it's funny because you talked about him possibly breaking the touchdown record this year in college football for the all time. And I think what we've seen a lot recently are some of these guys who are coming out of nowhere and playing well as rookies or young players. It's guys who played a ton of football at the college level. You look at in New England with Bailey Zappi, somebody who threw for 1 billion yards in college football. Those guys, they have the experience, they have the confidence to go in and just play the game. They're not really thinking, they're not really learning much more at this
Mhm.
point in their careers. But when you look at a guy like Hartman, the first thing that came to my mind when watching him against Navy was Taylor Heineke esque. I don't quite know if he has the same type of athleticism to get out of the pocket and consistently create on his legs, but with that ability to take hits and get right back up, the toughness in his game mixed with the lack of physical tools kind of reminded me a little bit of Heineke, who has seen a little bit of success as a spot starter in the NFL. So you never know with a guy like that, somebody who's played a ton of football. It could be a lot of fun to see, where he goes at the NFL level and see if he can stick on somewhere. But we have more quarterbacks to talk about, and it's going to get very confusing because there's about a 1 letter difference between two of the guys. And they are both very efficient passers, but we're not going to start there. We're going to start with Will Howard, Kansas State's quarterback.
Yeah, this is a fun quarterback class, and we've established that already. But just to rehash, our 1 through 5, I believe, was Caleb Williams, Drake May. I want to say Riley Leonard was 3. Who's 3?
No, Bo
Bo Nix.
Nix
That's
is
right. No,
number
it was Bo
3.
Nix and then
You
Jordan
made these
Travis. I
rankings.
forgot 2 of them, man. I swear. Today's not my day. Bo Nix and Jordan Travis were 3 and 4. Then Riley Leonard was 5. And let's see if I can get 6 and 10. That one's a little fresher. I know Spencer Rattler was 10. Jeff Sims
Mm-hmm.
was 9.
Mm-hmm.
Uh shoot. All right, that's it. I got
Number
nothing.
number 6 was JJ McCarthy.
JJ McCarthy, Quinn
You
Ewers was 7, and then number 8 was it was Michael Penix.
There we
There
go.
we
We
go.
got it. We worked
We
our
got it.
way through. Yeah, guys, go back and listen to those podcasts or watch them on YouTube. Make sure that you guys are following us on YouTube or subscribe to us on YouTube. Make sure that you guys are following us wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure you guys are giving us those 5-star reviews because they help get us out there into the internet ether.
Basically, any button you can
Spam
click
it.
except
Spam
the
it.
except the dislike button. Except
Yeah,
the dislike
yeah,
button.
yeah. For
Any
sure, for
button.
sure,
Yeah,
for
we got to
sure.
make that clarification.
You can
right?
send me DMs on Twitter if you dislike me, but
There we
don't
go.
do it on the podcast. Let's get to it. Will Howard. You have full notes on him, so I'm gonna just give you the floor because I haven't seen him.
Yeah, he was one that I wanted to kind of get more in depth with because watching that Kansas State offense, it was actually quietly a very efficient offense. I mean, obviously, they won the Big 12 championship last year, so they were doing something right. But they had a few really good players. I know Ben Sinnott at tight end is very good. Cooper Beebe on the interior offensive line could be an early round pick. But then I think the guy under center, Will Howard, man, he quietly had a
Hold
very
on, I got to stop you real quick.
yeah.
We cannot talk about Kansas State, especially last year, without talking about the Dallas Cowboys MVP, the small
Deuce
running
Vaughn.
back,
Yes,
Deuce
sir.
Vaughn. I know that he's no longer in college football and he's not draft eligible anymore, so we don't have to talk about him. But as a Cowboys guy, I have to bring up Deuce Vaughn whenever there is a mention of Kansas State.
No, man, I can't believe I forgot him too, man. I mean, he was one of the most dynamic players in college football, and I was so excited to see him drafted. But yeah, I mean that entire offense, they had good weapons, they had good blocking, but it was the guy under center who I thought really gave them the security, the stability that they needed to kind of carry on and reach that pinnacle, and that was Will Howard. I think he was a guy who really early in his career kind of got thrown into the fire. A little not completely like Jeff Sims, right? Because Will Howard had kind of a lull where he was completely a backup, right? Didn't get a ton of, he got some time to kind of recalibrate behind the scenes. But he did get thrown into the fire a bit, was a little unstable early on, but got his chance. I believe it was Adrian Martin. It was either Adrian Martinez or someone else who was their starter early on last year and ended up not holding the job. And Will Howard took it and ran with it and was a very efficient passer the rest of the way through. But he's a guy who 6'5", 242, definitely stands out on the field. He's got that prototypical frame, and I think he's got pretty solid physical talent for his size too. He doesn't have an elite arm, and that's very clear. I think he has enough arm strength to work. I think he's got good arm elasticity too. The angle freedom is definitely present with him. Not an elite creator, right? When you think of 6'5", 242, you're thinking, all right, is he Josh Allen? No, he's not Josh Allen, but he does have enough functional mobility to work off script, I think, and that's valuable. For me, some of the best traits in his game, I thought he was a pretty good processor, right, for his experience level, not having a ton of starting experience, but I think he clearly took that time behind the scenes off the field and used it to kind of hone his game and really kind of learn the game on a fundamental level. And now he's gotten to a point where you see him working right to left on progressions. While he's managing space in the pocket, that kind of multitasking ability is there. We've mentioned before, you're processing a lot of information from snap to snap as a quarterback, and I think the two bedrock things that Will Howard shows to me, that angle, that kind of leverage awareness as a passer, the processing ability, the progression work, and then also the pocket management. This is a guy who he's shown that he can sense looping pressure at depth and step up into the pocket. He's shown that he can, use micro movements and side steps to kind of evade pressure and, expand his time in the pocket. So those two things to me, are very valuable. Those are kind of foundational elements of quarterback play. And Will Howard has that, right? And then on top of that, too, he has good general accuracy. I think the situational precision could improve a little bit, and that kind of stems from some mechanical issues. But being a younger quarterback, that's something that's going to show up. I think with another year of full-time starting work, we could really start to say, and he's already very efficient with, those mechanical issues aside, right? So I think, already having that able processing ability, that pocket navigation ability, and the baseline physical talent, does he have NFL starter upside? I'm not quite there, but I could see him commanding mid-round capital as kind of like we discussed with Sam Hartman, a guy who's got that ability to be a quality safety blanket. And I do think he has a higher ceiling than Hartman. I think you've got, size adjusted, especially the size adjusted athleticism, I think is superior. And then the arm is good enough where if he did get spot starter reps, he could run with it. So, Will Howard is a guy I'm looking at as a sleeper. They've got good blocking again on the offensive line. That Ben Sinnott, I think, at tight end is very underrated. My tight end, too, very good athlete, very versatile player. And then they've got some weapons as well. Trayshawn Ward coming through the transfer portal. I'm excited to see what he can do because I do think you've got the baseline physical talent, the processing, the pocket navigation, just the general foundational elements of good quarterback play.
I love it. But you know what I love more?
What?
The Slim Reaper.
The Slim
LSU
Reaper.
quarterback Jayden Daniels. This is somebody who I have been enamored with ever since he stepped on the field for Arizona State as a freshman. He came on at the same time in 2019 as Devontae Smith was breaking out in his 17 billion yard season at Alabama. So there were two Slim Reapers at the time, and Jayden Daniels was trying to fight for the top spot there with Devontae Smith. Smith obviously ended up being a first-round pick. Jayden Daniels is still in college 5 years later, so I think we know who won that battle in the end. But he obviously needed a new situation outside of Arizona State. Things did not go well for him, especially during the 2 COVID years. He just was not the same player, did not have the same type of efficiency, goes to LSU. Did not have an easy battle with Garrett Nussmeier behind him. Garrett really pushed him and looked very good after Jayden Daniels was injured late last year. But I think when you look at him, he's one of my favorite quarterbacks. And I think that even if you don't end up getting starting caliber play from him at the NFL level, he's somebody who, first of all, is no longer a Slim Reaper. He has very, very narrow clavicles, so his shoulders aren't very big, so he's never going to look like a physically imposing player. But he's listed at 210 pounds now. He was probably 170 pounds as a freshman, so he has definitely put the work in and put the meals in to gain that weight that he needed to gain, and still has not lost that athleticism. And that's what makes Jayden Daniels, I say, special to me. His ability to create is some of the best in this entire draft class. And even if he doesn't end up being a day 1 or a day 2 pick, I think that he's somebody who, very much like in Baltimore with Tyler Huntley, another guy who I thought could have been drafted a little bit higher than he was, somebody who can be behind a mobile starting quarterback where you don't have to change the offense at all. And I think with Daniels especially, he's somebody who I like the mental side of his game quite a bit. I think that when I saw him, the thing that I was most impressed with going from Arizona State to LSU was the confidence that he has attacking zone coverage at this point, especially in the quick game. And you see this a lot, even with guys like Justin Fields, somebody who I'm a very, very big fan of in Chicago. the quick game is such an important aspect that we kind of undervalue, I think, a lot of the times when we talk about quarterbacks, because it's 65 to 70% of an offense at this point. You
Mhm.
want to get the ball out quick. You don't want to have to protect a guy for 3+ seconds. And I think that Jayden Daniels does a really good job of making the correct decision and getting the ball out of his hands very quick. I also think that he is a fantastic creator. The arm is funny because I think that he has a good arm. The problem with him is sometimes when he does get out of structure and he does have to create, the ball just does not come out of his hands very well. And as a quarterback back in the day in high school, I can relate to that quite well because there's sometimes where that ball just absolutely flutters out of your hands and does not go where you want it to go. And there are some really, really bad misses in his game. But I do think generally, when he's throwing in rhythm, he is very good. I particularly like the way that he sequences throwing to his right, that short right area. I think it's a really tough thing for quarterbacks to do. And he has that fluidity to his entire frame. A lot of it probably because he's not a very big guy. He has a ton of flexibility in his motion. I think that he uses arm angles well. But outside of all of that, it's his ability as a runner that really takes it to the next level. And I think as a spot starter, backup type guy in the NFL, he's somebody who can come in and actually make a difference for a couple of games before the league starts to kind of figure out how to defend him. A little bit like Taylor Heineke,
Mhm.
somebody who has come in and won games at the NFL level, but obviously Jayden Daniels is much more athletic overall than Taylor Heineke. And I think, again, we go back to it. He is incredibly experienced. And that type of experience gives these guys more often than not the confidence to come in at the NFL level and go running. So I am excited about what I'm going to see from him on the number 5 ranked LSU Tigers this year. He's got Malik Neighbors there on the outside, somebody who he can just trust to catch the football, even if he is completely draped.
Mhm.
And I think that's another thing. The situational ball placement that he has been very, very good at times. I just think that overall, down to down consistency is where you really need to see him improve passing the ball, and some of the downfield work a little bit more, ironing that out. And I think that you're looking at a guy who might be able to elevate himself into day two. I'm a little bit biased, obviously. I'm a big fan of his. But he's just so much fun for me to watch, man. And honestly, when you look at it, might be the best quarterback in the SEC.
Yeah, for sure. Hang on real quick. I got to stop the stopwatch. All right. Dalton talked about Slim Reaper for 20 minutes. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, no, I think a lot of it's interesting the way we talk about him, I think and this isn't a comparison by any means, but a lot of similarities to DTR from UCLA
Yes.
last cycle, a little bit thinner, leaner, but experienced, right? A little bit of volatility that's kind of precipitated throughout his career, but does have that good operational ability. I think DTR was a little bit smoother off script. You mentioned the ball doesn't
Hmm.
always come out of
Yeah.
his hand cleanly. I agree with that. But in the short game too, when I was watching Jayden Daniels, the way that he sequenced his mechanics. You said the word sequencing. I agree with that completely because he gets that back foot back first to torque the hips, places the front foot, and then just kind of flows through. It's very fluid for him in the short range, and that's what you want to see because operating the quick game, being able to create with your legs, and he's got that spry lateral athleticism, the speed, right, the
He makes
slippery.
dudes miss.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's slippery, man. That's what I've noticed is that he's got that ability to make guys miss, and that's fun. That's very actionable at the NFL level. So, like DTR, who's already made strides with the Browns, right? I could see him commanding a mid-round pick and being that backup who can create in adverse situations when he needs to. Athleticism is a common theme for most of these guys that we've got listed, in fact. And let's go to the confusing third quarterback who is very similar phonetically to Jayden Daniels, Jalon Daniels from Kansas. Um, have you watched him at all? I want to get you in first, real quick. You haven't at all, okay?
I have not yet, no. But
Okay,
I do know, I believe he was the most efficient quarterback in college football last year.
yeah, for sure. He let me pull up his passing stats here. But yeah, he completed, I want to say 152 of 230 passes, almost over 66%, over 2,000 yards, 18 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions. And then as a runner as well, 77 carries, 425 yards, 7 touchdowns. So a guy who's got that dual-sided value as a runner and a thrower. that shows up for him. So Jalon Daniels is one that I'm very much looking forward to watching this year. He's one of those quarterbacks who, it was his first year starting, so definitely needs a little more refinement. But 6 foot 220 is what he's listed at. I definitely think he's a little bit denser than a guy like Jalon Daniels. But he's a very fun runner as well. He's agile. He's got that in his kind of compartment. But what stood out to me is explosive. They kind of design runs for him in that offense. So he's not just a creator. He is an actual running threat who can add that dimension as a weapon on the ground. And then he's got the flexibility to kind of sustain acceleration as he's threatening upfield. He's got good speed and space. So the running element is there with Jalon Daniels. And then on top of that, too, in the pocket, we mentioned he was extremely efficient as a passer. There are legitimate flashes of good operational ability from him. Now, I do think mechanically, he needs to be a little more controlled at times. I think the release in particular, he's got really free flowing arm elasticity and angle freedom, and that shows up. I mean, he's a guy who can sidearm it, right? He can sustain velocity from a number of different slots. But with that comes some volatility with your release points. Sometimes he kind of overhands it a little bit because he's kind of clutching that a little too far. That can lead to low misses, some accuracy volatility. So I want to see him improve that. But with more time, I think that'll happen, right? And then there are times where he's surveying the middle of the field and he's looking off the linebacker at the middle of the field, with that first window throw, actively kind of keeping his eyes forward, freezing the linebacker. And then he's got the receiver on the hitch on the right side, just diverts immediately. So he does have an awareness of how to use eye manipulation to free up windows in the short range too, which is valuable, especially when you're talking about rhythm and kind of those quick game throws. He's got that. And then on top of that too, arm strength is there with him. We've seen him push it past the numbers, diagonally right to the intermediate range. He's got that ability, and then the arm elasticity to kind of layer velocity and touch. So, we talk about these high level traits. I think they're all there with Jalon Daniels. He's not a guy that I've graded yet because I think we need a higher sample size from him, but I would not be surprised if with another year of growth, we could see him enter the top 10 conversation and maybe the early round conversation because the size, the density, at least the creation ability, the arm talent, the strength, and then the building blocks on the mental side are all there. So I'm excited to see what he can do. A guy that we're kind of more in wait and see mode, right? But a guy who definitely has all of the foundational traits physically that you look for to actually command early round capital. So he's a guy, write him down, underline his name, keep him in the vault because even in this deep class, he could amount to something greater.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up eye manipulation because that's something that I omitted to talk about when I was talking about Jayden Daniels of LSU, something that he does really well at, and that just comes usually with experience. But if somebody like Jalon Daniels is doing that as a first-time starter, that's some big stuff because that is high level. To be able to move guys with your eyes and then attack that area that you were just manipulating is what you want to see from a quarterback, especially a young guy like Jalon. So I'm excited about that. You really kind of talked him up. I'm going to have to turn on that Kansas State tape. But the next guy we're going to talk about, because I figured we might as well just go back and forth here. We were going to do Cameron Ward next, but I'm going to take my time to speak and I'm going to talk about KJ. I'm going to talk about KJ Jefferson. Because I feel like I need to. I feel like I need to make this public service announcement.
He's a guy that I haven't gotten a ton of exposure to. So big-bodied guy. He's definitely been productive. But talk to us about what you've seen because you're the SEC guy. You've got the most exposure.
I have watched a lot of KJ Jefferson, and my overall take for him is that he is an athlete and he is a thrower, but he's not quite a quarterback. And I think when you watch somebody like him, the first thing that came to my mind when I watched him play was Tyree Jackson, who I'm not saying that KJ Jefferson has to become a tight end. Could he do it with his frame? Yes. He's 6'3". He is a legitimate 250 pounds. He is an animal. Is he athletic enough to be? Yes. Is he athletic enough to be an absolute weapon on the ground as a quarterback? Yes. But he is more of a passer than a quarterback, and that is just not going to work at the next level. He is decent running RPO, but when you get into straight drop back, it's really, really tough for him. He doesn't have the operational side of things down, and I think when you look at a guy who is now going into his third year as a starter, I don't know if he's going to be able to get that. I think that there's other issues as well for me. He's very mechanical in the way that he throws. And, some guys are able to get away with that, but it really affects his ball placement and accuracy in the short areas because he doesn't have that arm elasticity, he doesn't have the flexibility to really get himself in a good, proper situation sequencing. So there are inconsistencies in the short area. I think that, with a guy like him, you expect him to have a little bit more of an arm than he does. There's a little bit of
Yep.
Mason Rudolph to his game where the big, strong dude who just doesn't really have, again, the flexibility in his frame to really generate that torque and velocity in his midsection. Because a lot of what you get from a quarterback doesn't all come from that shoulder and the arm. Some guys are able to create ridiculous velocity just from that, but a lot of guys need to use their entire bodies. And that's how a guy like Baker Mayfield is able to generate very good velocity. It's through that torquing. And he doesn't really have that all of the time. It's very inconsistent velocity. Some things that I do like, as I said, he is a good passer. So just naturally, when he's in rhythm, very nice arm, very good accuracy. I actually really like what I've seen from him situationally, from a ball placement perspective down the field. And then, yes, at the end of the day, he is 6'3", 250 pounds, and a very, very good athlete. So he creates an extra gap for a defense to defend. And when you have him and Raheem Rocket
Yeah.
Sanders in the backfield,
That
you
backfield is
can
absurd.
you can terrify some very, very good football teams if you're able to keep up defensively, which, maybe Arkansas can do and maybe they can't. He's been effective for them. 9-4 a couple of seasons ago in his first year as a starter, and then last year a little bit worse, 7-6. But he's been very productive. He's been efficient as a passer, even though there are real concerns with him as a passer. And I think that the offense, there are a lot of manufactured touches getting the ball around the line of scrimmage, and that's just kind of the offense that you get when you are a lower level SEC team trying to compete against the Alabamas and the Georgias of the world. You got to run a heavy dose of RPOs. And I think that offense doesn't lend itself to him necessarily growing mentally as a passer. So he might have to do that at the NFL level as a day 3 pick or an undrafted free agent. I think that he has a long way to go before I would consider him a draftable product, but I understand the want, the desire, and the um I'm trying to think of the word here. I understand the want to
Mhm.
want him to be awesome.
You understand why there's some interest there
Yes, the,
across
the
the
interest is easy.
yeah.
He's got a decent arm. He's again 6'3", 250 pounds, and
Dude's a tank.
like a great athlete. Like he's not somebody who is just fast. He's not somebody who is just powerful. When he's moving, he's pretty spry too. But he just operationally
Yep.
as a quarterback, it's not all there for him.
And that's the thing too, the biggest thing that I got to watch a little bit of him, and the thing that stood out to me the most is that as big as he is, you don't see the ball pop out of his hand with the velocity that you would want, right? It doesn't have, it's not a liability from arm strength, but especially earlier in the cycle, there were some notions across the consensus that maybe this could be a guy who challenges for round one capital. I don't know if I'm there yet, just because operationally, like you said, a lot of work to do. And even then, when you look at guys who have work to do operationally, you want the physical talent to kind of counteract that. And he's a good athlete. He's a great athlete for his size, but the arm strength to me is not there. And that's just as, if not more important, if you're delineating between a starter and a backup at the NFL level.
Yep. Yep. I totally agree.
We got
We're
one
gonna
more, right? Cameron
yeah,
Ward,
we're gonna
Washington
move
State.
on. Cam Ward, Washington State, somebody who there's some people that really, really enjoy Cam Ward. I haven't
Mhm.
gotten to see much of him yet. How do you feel about him?
Yeah, I've gotten to watch a little bit. I think an argument that we made for Caleb Williams, right, for a negative for him is that he creates some of the chaos that he navigates through, right? I think you can say a similar thing for Cameron Ward. I think Cameron Ward is, we've talked about Williams and Quinn Ewers too as a quarterback who, is so good flowing through that chaos, but sometimes they're just kind of freeloading out there, just kind of free playing, doing what they want to do. And I think Cameron Ward is kind of in that same mold where he still needs more discipline and maturity in his game as a passer, both from a pocket navigation standpoint, from a mechanical standpoint. So, looking at that, I think that's something he can clean up. But, the arm talent, the arm elasticity, those are things that are absolutely, there to the highest degree with Cameron Ward. I mean, he's a guy who makes, sidearm throws and underhand throws and just the angle freedom look effortless when he's off platform too, really good hip flexibility. And I think that's another thing that stands out with him. And one thing that we've mentioned time and time again with guys like Bo Nix too, the change of direction to evade pressure threats and create inside and outside the pocket. Quinn Ewers is a guy who doesn't quite have that change of direction, right? He's a guy who's, fluid enough, but, not spry out of those direction changes. Cameron Ward has that slippery ability in the pocket, and he's not the fastest guy, but he is a guy who can evade and create off platform and then maintain that velocity off platform. So, all those things, they stand out with him, and he was incredibly productive at Incarnate Word. I think he tore up the FCS, before moving to Washington State, and then he had a decent year last year. But I think maturation as a passer, is really what you're looking for from him, because mechanically, right, we've seen it time and time again, that free flowing nature can lead to volatility at the release point, right? It can lead to, kind of inconsistency with your mechanics and accuracy. So that's shown up for him very much so. And then I think the mental side has room to grow as well. A lot of times he's really just creating out there, and he's very good at it. But I don't think he has elite arm strength either. I think he's got a slightly stronger arm than Ewers maybe, but kind of in that similar bucket where it's not elite, the velocity generation. It's more the arm elasticity and the ability to create throwing windows that helps him out. So I think more maturation as a passer, a little more development on the operational, the mental side. And if we can see that, I think he's got more hip flexibility and change of direction than Ewers does. So, I could see him maybe challenging for that early round capital. Again, not quite a guy who's going to create consistently as a running threat, but as a passer, as an off-platform, out-of-structure passer, definitely has that. So, I think I would probably grade him. I haven't graded him yet, but were I to run his grade, I think he'd land around Ewers for me, just because they're kind of similar prospects with that, that creative ability, that arm elasticity, but also the lack of elite arm strength and the need for more refinement on the operational side.
Makes a lot of sense to me. It's really funny because we went through this and I asked, I was like, maybe we would just talk about quarterbacks today. We wouldn't go through and actually talk about the games. We would just save all that for Thursday, for the Friday pod. And then we were like, well, can we actually talk about 7 quarterbacks for a half an hour? And guess what we did? It was actually 6 quarterbacks, I think, and we talked about them for a half an hour. It's just, we're long-winded individuals, you and I, Ian.
Yeah, we always surprise ourselves with how talkative we are, man. It gets it gets to the point where we kind of need to give ourselves like the little nudge, like, all right, let's be careful here. But then we give that nudge, and it's just like we go 6 minutes for each quarterback anyway. So
all right, so yeah, let's just quickly get into some of these games, and then we will get out of here. What game are you most excited for?
Most excited for. I want to be careful I don't go through the prospect matchups too, because we've got a whole other episode for that, right?
Yeah, we're not talking about prospects at all. Literally, don't bring up a single prospect's name.
I'll try not to say a name.
Just talk about the game.
All right, this is a challenge for me, but Duke and Clemson, I will say that. I think the trenches is going to be phenomenal in this one on both sides of the ball. Duke O-line versus Clemson D-line, Clemson O-line versus Duke D-line. A ton of talent there. Duke has a quarterback who was in our top 5, who's going to be really, really exciting to watch against that Clemson defense.
You can say their name.
No, I can't. No, I committed to it already. There's no going back. Duke has many wide receivers. Yeah, they're good. Yeah, Clemson.
They play multiple wide receivers on the field at once. Is that what
they do? Saying? Yeah, they got that 11 personnel, that 1-2. They like to mix it up, man. So no, but I think that's gonna be a fun one in the trenches and with the quarterback matchup, and then a lot of really talented Clemson defenders in the second and third levels. 2 guys, I'll say 2 names: Andrew Makuba, Barrett Carter. They're both top 10 graded on my board. I'm a big fan of what they have to offer. So that's my game to watch. That's the one that I'm circling. A few really good ones, but that's the one that stands out to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have to. It's Florida State and LSU for me. That's the one, and it's because of everything. It's because of both quarterbacks. It's because of the Southeastern Conference against the ACC. You have Florida versus Louisiana. It is going to be a blast. That is going to be Sunday night at 7:30 or maybe 8:30. I'm actually in Texas right now, so sometimes ESPN does the times in Central Time and not Eastern Time. So I don't know what time it is for sure, but listen, guys, I like to sleep. Like I really like to sleep. I wake up early. I go to bed early. I will watch every waking second of that football game. I am so excited for that. Some of the other games I'm excited for, On Saturday night, North Carolina and South Carolina, Battle of the Carolinas. Who will win that game? Who has the state
Superiority.
advantage,
Yeah.
superiority? There we
Yeah.
go. And we will have a couple of quarterbacks in that game that are draft eligible and highly spoken of. So we have that game. We have Penn State and West Virginia. And another game that we are all looking for earlier in the week, Thursday, is Florida and Utah. Any other games? Wait, Deion's first game at Colorado against TCU. What do you expect from Colorado? Just as a total aside.
It's gonna be interesting to see a lot of moving parts, and they
So
had
many.
a few guys who ended up re-entering the transfer portal after the spring game, right? So I think they're gonna take their lumps early on. I do think that moving to the Pac-12, but Shadur Sanders is a quality quarterback. I think he was one guy who kind of graded in the day 3 range for me when I watched him. I think mechanically there's some work to do, but he was very productive at Jackson State, and he's got the stability with Deion Sanders being the head coach. So I think they're going to take their lumps early on. I think this game against TCU will be a very good barometer for them because TCU is a team that has a lot of talent coming back from last year. They have some changeover at quarterback, but again, the offensive line is talented. The defense has a lot of athletic players who can make plays on the ball if you give them a chance. So, I think looking at that, TCU is going to be a tough test from a roster standpoint. So I think it'll be a really good barometer early on.
And the last question I'm going to ask you, and this is the most important thing that we've talked about today. Iowa is a 25-point favorite against Utah State. Will they score 14 points? will Iowa's offense score 14 points? It might be 14-0, but will they score 14 more?
Yeah, so we were talking about the schedule before the podcast and like teams to watch, and Dalton mentioned Iowa, and I was like, oh, who are they? Will they score more than 14 points? And I asked, who are they playing? He's like, Utah State. I'm like, okay, maybe. The answer is maybe. I think the defense is going to have all the talent. Cooper DeJean, obviously. Deontay Craig, versatile defensive lineman who, I've got
why are we talking about prospects now?
I'm sorry, man. It's so easy to get into that mode again, man. All right, no more names, but Iowa's defense is legit. And I think it'll be interesting to see what their new quarterback from Michigan can do, who I will not name, Caden McNamara. There we go. I had to. But I think I'm going with like 17 points, maybe 20. I think McNamara will help them out a little bit.
Okay, so you heard it here first. Take Iowa State to cover. All right, guys, that's all we got for you today. Make sure you guys are giving us 5 stars. Make sure that you guys are following us wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure that you guys are subscribing to the YouTube channels. And we have so much content coming y'all's way. I'm so excited to get into this college football season. I haven't actually followed a college football season in years now. Even when I was doing my draft stuff, I'd catch a game or two here or there, but most of my work was done from the time of February until April. I am so excited to work throughout the entire college football season. As always, guys, I love you. Goodbye.